Hello, this is Michael Tracy, and this video is going to look at various photo perspectives of Mount Everest to analyze the various ridge routes on the north side in preparation for the upcoming video about the zigzag route. Any photograph of the mountain is going to distort some aspect of it. Looking at these three photographs, this first one is taken from the pass, this one from base camp, and this one from North Col. You might think it is a different mountain or a different side of the mountain, but they all show the same side of the same mountain, but they are all distorted in some way. Even looking at just the first step, in this photo it looks like it is a vertical wall that would be extremely difficult to climb. And yet in this photo it looks like you could walk up fairly easily. The truth is somewhere in between those two, but closer to easy than to a vertical wall. So what I'm going to do in this video is go through a detailed review of the terrain along and close to the northeast ridge, and it will become apparent that Mallory would never have attempted any type of ridge route. The first problem is that the term ridge route has multiple meanings, and the term meant something completely different in 1924 than it does today. Today, the phrase ridge route, as it applies to the north side, means the modern northeast ridge route. This route is just 1 mile in total and takes the first, second, and third steps. It was first climbed by the Chinese in 1975. The 1960 Chinese team bypassed the first step to the north. Whether the 1960 Chinese reached the summit will be the subject of a future video. I'm going to walk through the modern route with a particular focus on the early part of the route because that will be relevant in future videos in terms of problems with where the oxygen bottle was supposedly found, why Irvin hasn't been found, and how certain parts of the modern route might be similar to certain parts of the zigzag route. The modern route starts at High Camp and heads up to these two cracks in the yellow band. The 1933 team took the snow gully to the left, and the modern route sometimes takes the gully to the right. The route changes occasionally and sometimes even goes up the middle between the two. This is from between modern High Camp and the climbers' gullies up into the yellow band. You can see the route in that year sort of goes up the middle but ends up on the left-hand gully. This photo shows the reverse, and you can see modern High Camp. If you head up to that bulge in the yellow band, that is the bulge next to the gully to the left. The gully to the right is not visible in this photo. From there, the modern route and the 1933 route meet up at the 1933 High Camp, which is here. The 1933 High Camp is just above this short step. In this photo, the step looks difficult, and it would be, except there is a break about halfway up it that allows it to be climbed fairly easily. You're breathing hard at the top, but it requires no great mountaineering skill. Here, the step looks like just a short and slightly steep slope. From the 1933 High Camp, there are three routes up. The one climbed by Frank Smythe and Eric Shipton, the one climbed by Wynne Harris and Wagger, and the modern route. The modern route heads up the gully, which is known as the exit cracks, as the crack exits onto the ridge. The exit crack is of interest because it is roughly the same slope as the zigzag route, but while steep, not particularly difficult. This photo is taken across what would be the route taken by Wynne Harris, and it is from just below the exit crack, but it is useful because you can see Smythe's traverse. Smythe and Shipton traversed much lower than Wynne Harris, and this is their traverse on the way up, and this is Smythe's traverse on the way back, which can also be seen in this photo. At the top of the exit crack, the modern route follows these ropes along the ridge before it heads in slightly. From there, the modern route climbs the first step, heads over to Mushroom Rock, and then up the second step. This is the base of the second step, the head wall, and this view is looking back along the ridge from just below the head wall. I know I'm going a little fast here, so just pause the video if you need to, but more details of the second step will be analyzed in an upcoming video about the alleged 1960 Chinese ascent. Once above the second step, the modern route follows this fairly long and easy traverse to the third step, and then, in what is probably the oddest choice in the modern route, it takes the third step directly rather than simply walking around and climbing up in between the lower third step Alpha and the middle third step Bravo. Once past the third step, there is the snow triangle. The modern route does not climb directly up the citadel, but bypasses it to the right. The bypass is made up of the summit traverse and the dihedral, so called because it is two large rock slabs that form a dihedral angle. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo of it. Once up the dihedral, you are on the final summit ridge, which, while fairly straightforward, takes much longer than you anticipate. And this is me on the summit. You can see Zhangbu just below, climbing up next to the rocks, which is likely where Hillary collected his summit rock samples. Tenzing collected his samples lower down on the southeast ridge. The 1960 Chinese also claim to have collected rocks from that area, and ultimately it is those rocks that can be used to prove or disprove the 1960 Chinese summit. And there have been some recent developments that should make that possible, but it's still a little too early to say. So that is the modern route. Not surprisingly, the 1924 team knew nothing about the modern route, and today charlatans use a reference to the, quote, ridge route by the 1924 team to mean the modern route. However, when looking at exactly what the 1924 team said, they were referring to an entirely different route, namely the route along the actual crest of the ridge. Norton wrote, "The line we had followed was one roughly parallel to and perhaps 500 to 600 feet below the crest of the northeast arête. This was the line Somerville and I had always favored in preference to the actual crest which Mallory advocated." And if there was any confusion on exactly what the term ridge route meant in 1924, Odell clears it up. Following what we call the ridge route, i.e. the crest of the northeast arête, there seemed to be only two places which might in any way cause them trouble. Thus the route that Norton and Odell thought Mallory climbed was the actual crest of the ridge, approaching both the first and second steps head on. Of course, that route is impossible, and Mallory said it was impossible. There is also no reason to believe that Mallory somehow discovered the modern route 50 years earlier than the Chinese. It is not intuitive to climb the first step to access the second step, especially when you can just go around the first step and reach the base of the second step by climbing up to Mushroom Rock, the way the Chinese did in 1960. Once there are ropes and a ladder in place, of course the modern route is easier, but there is no reason to believe Mallory would have attempted a route he never spoke to anyone about. You can see in this photo the crest of the ridge. This is the first step, Mushroom Rock, and the second step. No one would attempt to climb that route, nor would Mallory attempt the second step from below. The second step is not a deceptive obstacle. It looks difficult from far away, it looks difficult as you approach it, and when you actually get to the head wall, it looks extremely difficult. Even when Conrad Anker climbed it in 2007, he fell on his first attempt. If he had not been using the significant amounts of protection, he would be at the bottom of the glacier. Mallory and Irvin did not have modern cams, nor even pitons, so there is no way Mallory would attempt such a difficult climb with Irvin holding a rope wrapped around a rock. So this should have us well prepared to review the two routes Mallory did state were options for him, namely the zigzag and the couloir, and I hope to have that video done shortly.